Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds. We're sharing and learning from one another, it's a vibe. ReadswithRosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know, multifaceted and humble, taking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Make you strive. Monumental. Come rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out. Talo Falava and welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. You know, I'm a strong believer in giving a person their flowers while they are still here. But when it comes to today's guest, I honestly don't know where to start. I feel like it would be disrespectful if I didn't try and mention as many of his achievements and accolades as I can. He is a multi-talented and accomplished musician, a sound, video, and music producer. His work spans traditional music composition and production through to experimental avant-garde sound art. Because of his thorough approach to research, engagement, and innovative application, his skills are in high demand in both the traditional and wider creative industries. It is my honor to welcome to the show Tiumalu Noma, aka Anonymouz. What's up, bro?
Thank you for that. Malo lava soy fuamanlangi masas. Really appreciate the kind words and just lovely to be here, sis. I love it.
Man, it's cool to see you, bro. Before we move forward, I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you could just share your cultural roots, a little bit about your family and just your villages.
Yeah, I love it. So my mother is from Salonga in Savaii, and my father is from Tanga in Savaii, and they migrated here and they had me in Mangere, South Auckland. And I'm just very proud of the mix that makes me up, and it's a mix that I've been trying to pursue since forever. But very proud to be a son of Savaii by way of South Auckland.
That's cool, bro.
And shout outs to my mum. So my mum, Saili, and my father, Fayumu Tumo, too.
Yay, that's what's up. Okay, so I really wanted to ask about your upbringing. What was that like? What were you like at school? What were you into at school? When did you really start getting into like music and the arts?
Yeah, cool. Ironically, one of my first memories has to do with books, but in quite an unconventional way. I used to be able to fit with my younger brother into our bookcase. So we had a little bookcase in our lounge, and I was just fascinated with, I don't know how I got into it, but I used to go in there and rearrange the books and put them on their sides, on their spines, so that the edges of the books were exposed, and then I'd rolled marbles down them. And so I'd arrange the books in a way, whatever books, what selection of books were there and the shapes and the sizes, you just kind of arrange it so that it became a marble track. It went off that book and then it dropped onto that book and then it went down to that corner and came back in. And that's, I guess, a metaphor for kind of like how I've been ever since. I've just loved that hip hop spirit and concept of kind of taking things that exist as they are and then rearranging them or reconstructing them in a new way. And so, my parents worked really hard to put me and my younger brother through school. And, every day used to kind of go across the Mangere Bridge out of South Auckland over to Auckland Grammar in the city, which was a bit of a culture clash because over there was a lot of, metal, a lot of different types of music, which I really loved, eventually loved and got into as well. And yeah, they had a studio there, pre-production setup, and that's the first time I came across Logic Pro, which is what I still use to this day. But prior to that, I was making beat pause tapes in my lounge, which is basically where you use a cassette tape deck for the younger members of the audience who don't know what a cassette tape deck is, and how we used to make beats. And what you'd do is you'd connect the Casio keyboard into the microphone input, and you'd hit record, and then you'd play like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of just a drum beat, and then you'd put that tape into tape B, press play, so you're playing that back, and then on tape A, you're hitting record, and now you're playing in the bass line. And so you've got a drum beat and a bass line, and then you keep swapping the tapes back and forth, and you repeat that process until you've got a beat. And I just fell in love with that process, and I just transferred that over to Logic. And then after Logic, started playing around Final Cut, and it's just an ongoing journey. But ever since a child, I've always been fascinated with just technology, how to use things in this existing world and flip them. And I guess at a deeper level, that's just a hip hop thing that we just love to not see the world as it is, but what it could be.
Let's talk about hip hop since you've mentioned it. What was your first memory of hearing rap music or even being introduced to hip hop?
First memories, gosh, there's hazy memories of Red Head Kingpin, who was out of rapper back then, but he had some really funky stuff. But where it really popped off for me was like Dr. Dre, Cypress Hill, in particular. I remember hearing "Keep the Heads Ringing" for the first time, and that kept my head's still ringing from that. And Cypress Hill was one of the most foundational hip hop artists for me, because like they were so funky, but they wove their lingo into it. They had like Mexican, Latino slang in it. And then I remember back then too, around that same time, I heard Kaz, the Field Style, he was starting to do the same thing here. And so I was like, wow, this is, I love all this hip hop, but this hip hop that has our language in it, this is something else. And so, yeah, it started off with a lot of gangster rap, a lot of West Coast. I'm from Mangere, so we listened to a lot of, a lot of West Coast here. We didn't listen to Notorious B.I.G. or any East Coast then, because Tupac told us not to. So, we were diehards, and kind of like in South Auckland, Aotearoa is like the Compton. They're all about that energy. And I'm from Mangere, which is next to the water, and so we're Long Beach. We're chilled. So there's a lot of G-Funk. There was a lot of G-Funk, a lot of West Coast hip hop, a little bit of New York hip hop, but that didn't come till later, after we matured as an audience, and we're like, man, Biggie was the man. And there's so much dope East Coast hip hop, but for me, those were like the foundational acts. Apart from as a child, it was like Vanilla Ice and Reddy Kingpin, but it was just, I guess, the newness of the sound. But when I fully leaned into it was when I started to hear the energy and the aesthetic of, I guess, the gangster rap and a lot of that stuff.
When you think about New Zealand hip hop, who were some of when we think about the pioneers of New Zealand hip hop, who were some of the ones that you looked up to, when you were coming up? Can you remember any that really kind of stood out for you?
Yeah. So the pioneers for me, like Erman was one of them. So I really loved gangster rap. That was one of my first forays into hip hop as a genre. I remember hearing "Keep the Heads Ringing" by Dr. Dre. My head's still ringing back from those days. And I loved Cypress Hill. Like those were kind of two of my foundational artists, was Dre and Cypress. Cypress because they had a really dusty, real out of it sound, but they used their Latino and Spanish language and lingo in it, and I thought that was fascinating. And then when I started to hear, I remember hearing one of Kaz's first demos way back in the underground track, and he was spitting in Samoan, Siva. Man, I forgot what that track was called, but that was a gangsta's track. And then finding out that him and Erman used to have a show on 531 PI and a couple of the Lost Tribe boys on Sunday evenings, and I used to listen to that as a kid. And people would call in, and the whole thing was you got to try to hold a conversation with them, and if they thought they were boring, they'd go fire, and they'd just kick you off the thing. And so Erman, all the Southside pioneers were big for me, but especially Erman, all the pioneers of Pacifican Frontier, Urban Pacifica, a lot of that stuff. Damn Native was huge. Oh man, shout out to Sam too. Like you know, the Breaking Wreck
Yes.
click. I've still got their CD somewhere. You know, just so much buzzing material.
Mm.
But yeah, definitely I had to say foundational wise, it was definitely Erman, Kaz, and you know, the Southside artists.
You know, when you think about New Zealand hip hop, how has it evolved? From your perspective, how has it evolved, changed, moved forward? I guess, you know, over the years from, you know, way back then.
Yeah, it's come a long way. It's come a long way. You know, I don't believe that it's a monolith, that there's only one style. Like hip hop is supposed to be diverse. It's about, you know, if somebody does it this way, you do it that way, and somebody does it that way, you do it this way. And so I love how many different strands there are in the local scene, and how everybody finds their niche. You know, I grew up unapologetically proud of a lot of our South Auckland sound and aesthetic, but you know, things have to evolve, and you know, you don't want to kind of get bogged down by stereotypes and a lot of that stuff, which is something that, you know, I started to find myself in a while back too. And so I kind of had to kind of just try to figure out how to evolve, from just being what a lot of people might paint South Auckland hip hop as. But I love how people are weaving their stories into it and being apologetically, you know, them in terms of their intersection of the overall hip hop landscape, but also, you know, customizing it to their geography, like their location and how they get down, or you know, their language and all these types of things. But I'm really proud of how far, you know, New Zealand hip hop's come, and yeah, it's me.
You know, in 2018, there was this project called For the Luma. Okay, you explored and presented traditional Samoa practices in an urban aesthetic and context. You brought together rappers, poets, Samoan orators, and community performers. Can you tell us where that idea came from? What was the inspiration behind that particular project?
Yeah. So, you know, I'm really proud, you know, and this continues on from the previous question, you know, around New Zealand hip hop. You don't have New Zealand hip hop without Pacific Moana artists in hip hop. Like we not only thrive in it, we almost dominate the space, or have dominated the space. And so, you know, I used to always wonder, why are we so good at this thing? And then, you know, kind of growing up, like I've always grown up with my dad, like in the lounge or the bedroom, and he's always like, oh, cool, mama, like saying all these weird stuff, and I'm like, man, what's he doing? And then, you know, I'd see him get up at family functions and church functions, and he'd be doing his laonga, you know. And I was fascinated by that process in Samoa, where they have the whakao, where they kind of literally try to outwit each other, using language and metaphors, and you know, snarky comments and little sly digs, and trying to catch the other person out. You know, and growing up around, you know, some freestyle rappers, I was like, man, this is exactly the same thing. And so I wanted to build a project that was founded on, you know, the overlap between the two worlds of, you know, us younger generation, how we use, you know, we go into battle, we step forward and we're representing our clique, and our clique is behind us, you know, like, yeah, this is our boy, you know, and what? And you're trying to go up against the other side and their battle rapper and their clique, you know. And then it's the same thing with Samoa. When the two villages or families come together, you got one makai on this side, not with a microphone stand, but with a fue and ko'o, and he's going at it with the other dude, and they're using the same thing. And it gets confrontational, but at the end of the function, you know, it's like, man, you got me good on that one, you know, they're shaking hands and it's all good. So just from a cultural aspect, I was like, man, there's so many great parallels between how our younger generation wield oratory and how our fathers wield oratory. And so that was, I guess, the foundation for that. And, you know, we put that show together, and, you know, I was like, okay, cool. Well, who's the best battle rapper in New Zealand at the moment? And, you know, Scholar, and he's Samoan, you know, and he was on board, you know. Okay, who's our OG orator? Kaz. Cool, let's get Kaz. Got him on board. And there's some other OG, you know, Tula Fale's here, you know, Lemoa and Musu, and, you know, and then we got a whole bunch of spoken word poets, and just, it was a community approach to it. So it was done through the Auckland Arts Festival Whānui program. And so we put the community call out for participants who were interested in either hip hop culture or traditional Samoa culture, or just wanted to be part of the blending and the, you know, the integration of the two. And so it all came together really, really well. Had a lot of my sisters from Mangele Mekukisi kind of helped out with the choreography and the Siva Samoa and all that type of stuff. But it was a real fusion of cultures. And like I said, it's kind of been part of an overall, journey of mine where I'm just trying to make peace of the different worlds I come from, because let's be honest, like, I've played church services my whole life, up and, I was in my teens, I was at church 6 evenings a week, from about the age of, 12 through to, 25, early 30s. That was me in church 6 days a week playing and stuff. But outside of that church life, like the night beforehand, I'm playing church on the Sunday. We're in the car parks drinking, getting hammered, listening to West Coast rap and all these types of things. And, looking back at it, yes, there's life lessons on the way, but I realized, as an artist, it's an opportunity to make peace with your history or what you did and have no regrets. I was like, oh, well, let me just take the culture, the traditions, and and our exploration of just being young and trying to figure this life thing out through hip hop and just put them together. So that's what For the Illuminati represented. Also was on I traveled a lot with the Ufa Samoa 101 program around the world, which is a program that was set up to kind of revive a lot of the indigenous customs and practices that were being lost. And so a lot of the information that I'd kind of learnt on that journey of 4 or 5 years, traveling the world with them, I wove it into the work so that it could be, it was just another form of cultural ministry.
Oh man, that is so cool. You mentioned the Methodist Church, and so I wanna run that back and ask you, what are some memories, some highlights from, because you were young growing up through the church and, you were the pianist. So I imagine you were composing and, arranging music and that kind of stuff. So when you look back, Gary, what are some highlights for you?
All the highlights is the friends you make along the way, and yeah, like it's the best training ground for the creative industries, no disrespect to all the others, everybody's journey, but when you are forced, under threat of violence, often, when you are forced to come up with an arrangement every week, new choreography, new remixes, new beats. And, at the time I had a little basic studio set up. And so, every week I was like, okay, what's the hottest song at the time? It was a Tupac song. So I'd kind of figure out how to make him 19 fit with Thug's Mansion. And then, the next week it's like, oh yeah, this Dre song came out. How do I use that? And, and it was an opportunity to kind of really be creative and lean into kind of coming up with the things and committing to things, which is a big thing for a lot of artists. Sometimes as artists, we just spend too long on stuff and we're forever working on something and it tends to go sideways. Whereas growing up in church, you always had to come up with a new Fire Vangali or a new song every week. And so, yeah, that was foundational for me, as well as, teaching Delphi Besse and going through all of that phase where you're dealing with adults and trying to get them to sing back what you're trying to play to them and trying to tune their ears. And so that was great conditioning as well. So yeah, good memories of church, also not so good memories as well. And that's all part of it. Like, looking back, it's easier to kind of criticize the church for a lot of the things that could have been done better. But that's our job, as now that we are becoming older, is to kind of educate our parents in the church on what could have been done better, what can we calibrate and so forth. But overall, net balance, I love, I was, Mangele Methodist was such a creative church. Like, we had the Batsy brothers from Solimil, they were our other choir masters. We had Paul Nisi, who's over at Creative New Zealand, Whanati, who's one of our top videographers, Nisa Collins from X Factor, and so many artists out in the industry doing their thing. We all came up together as a youth group. Actually, ironically too, like one of my highlights of church was going to the Te Aratu e Whakasa Hip-Hop for God. Right. They had they invited all the other youth groups to come together and, have a big hip-hop, express, our traditional cultural values through hip-hop. And for me, I was like, what, this is the best thing ever. And that's where, I first met, a lot of the Whakasa fams and obviously Lani, the OG, Still doing his ministry. Man, I'm so proud of him. So I'm very fortunate to have come through the traditional church circles. Yeah, I know a lot of shots get thrown at us for being fobs and behind, but you've got to have that conservative anchor in order to, especially in this day and age, to kind of gauge against, and then you find out how you can responsibly elasticize from these fundamental truths that our parents hold. So, yeah, shout out to all the Meckles in the house, as well as the Efakasas and the Catholics. Yeah.
Hey, I forgot to ask, does mum or dad, your parents play, were they musicians? They play any instruments? Do your kids play any, does it run through the family? This art, craft?
Yeah, my parents aren't really that musical. Like, I didn't grow up with, much music around them playing and stuff, but it's my auntie, so it's my dad's sister. She was the one that, every Saturday I used to get dropped off to her house as a child. And she would take me along to her piano lessons, and kind of that's how I started getting into it. It was through my auntie, and it was primarily through that reason to play for church. So my parents were like, you are going to learn how to play piano so that you can play for church. And so I was like, cool, I don't have a choice. Luckily, I wasn't that good a student as a classical student. Like I did the bare minimum to get through the grades and so forth. And, I did really well up until about grade 5. And that's when I discovered logic. Like once I found out how to make beats and stuff, like my piano teacher really wanted me to be a classical pianist and so forth. And, it wasn't really until the music didn't click with me. Like I love the aesthetic of how classical music sounds. And I learned the discipline, and I went through the Royal Schools of Music grades and all of that. But, admittedly, I wasn't the most committed student, especially once I realized how I could play something into Logic. Like the day I walked into the music block and the teacher said, that's Logic Pro. And, it's now Logic Pro 10. I got into it at 3.5. But the second when I played something into Logic and I hit record, and when I pressed play and it played it back to me, my whole life changed. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do forever. Like, I know that this feels like home. Yeah.
And did you do any, is it all self-taught? What I mean is in terms of, just the learning the equipment, how to use, the production, all of that. Is it all self-taught? Did you study and do some courses? Like, because, do you know what I mean? It's difficult, man. You either get it or you don't, or you one of those geniuses.
No genius. Well, let me just flip it. How did you learn how to do all this podcasting and StreamYard stuff? Like, this is pretty impressive.
I'm still learning, man.
There you go. Well, there you go. That's exactly it. Big student of YouTube.
Okay.
Like, I did come through, you learn along the way, and, everything's is a what did Lani once tell me? Like, wherever you can kind of get information, that's kind of, whether that's from people, whether that's through courses, whether that's YouTube. I YouTubed a lot. But I guess to a certain degree, my mind and my personality is wired in a way where I just accumulate production processes. Like, it's kind of like when you learn, they say that when you learn piano, it's much easier to transfer that over to other instruments,
right?
Other guitars, because you look at a guitar and you're like, okay, those are the keys. I guess that must be this, and that, okay, that must be a semitone, so this must be the chord. So when you kind of get a foundational skill in some instruments, it prepares you well for other instruments. And that's how it's been for me in terms of production is, once I kind of learned how cassette tapes work, or the marbles, once I knew how to arrange books to make the marble do a thing. And then I knew, okay, well, I can do these things with cassette tape decks. And if I do this, I can make it do this thing. And so once Logic opened up, I was like, cool, I can make it do this thing. And then, Final Cut Pro, okay, it must be like Logic, we arrange it to do this thing. And now, now we have things like blockchain and Web 3.0 and all these things, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, how do I make it do this thing? So I guess my mind is production oriented in terms of in order to do this, you got to do this, and then you can make it do this, and then you do that, and you move that here to make it do this. So that's the core fundamental thing underneath my thinking that just, you know, underpins everything.
Man, I want to talk about the music business in New Zealand. Who is teaching our up-and-coming, you know, new artists, our Pacific Island musicians about money, about making good business deals, about contracts, copyright, APRA, and things like that? You know, is it that there is a collective of OGs out there who are teaching and doing that work and, you know, passing on that knowledge? Or is it really just up to the artists to go out, research it, and figure it out themselves?
Yeah, great question. Very timely question. Yes, there will always be responsibility on the artist to do it for yourself. Like, you know, that like often says, no one's coming to save you. Like, we would love to think that you can just be an artist and everybody's going to come and hold your hand and show you how to do this. But ultimately, from a foundational standpoint, you know, if you are an artist out there and you have no idea how the industry works or how to do your royalties, and yet, you know, you've got enough time to watch, you know, 5 hours of Netflix a week or be on social media, like, time is a resource. Where you put your energy and time is a resource. And so, you know, this information is out there. So it seems like a lot of people don't want to do the hard work. They just want to do the cool stuff like the creating, which I understand, because the other stuff can really do your head in. And so there is a role and responsibility from the other end of the equation, from the industry as a collective. You know, this becomes a question of like the rights of the individual to do the work and the rights of the collective to inform the individuals. And on that note, there's not enough being done in terms of the collective. You know, I don't want to create any drama and start naming some names here, but there are a lot of organizations and labels and people in this game who have been milking artists forever, you know, for a long, long time. And there's a house of cards that will fall soon. There's some dominoes that are going to fall soon. There are some OGs in this industry who are feeling very nervous and going to sleep every night very unsure about what headlines they might wake up to in the morning. And hey, people put themselves in those positions. But, you know, at the end of the day, there are, you know, there's just a lot of respect between people. Like, if you write something, you are entitled to that. You should never, as an artist, you know, write songs and then all of a sudden somebody else registers it, and then you go to look at the song and there's all these names. You have no idea who they are, who these companies' names are. And they've been doing this not for days or weeks or months, but years, decades. And then you've got people, some of them being our own people, who have turned a blind eye to a lot of this and have enabled it and so forth. And so what I can say is there are good people in this industry that are doing their damn best to fix this up, because a lot of people just want to turn their backs to it and just let it be what it is. I don't know if they've, you know, if it puts their risks at mate, or put their mates at risk, or puts their bags at risk, or whatever arrangements they've got. But we need a clean out of a lot of the dirty tactics that are being used in this industry, both at a record label level and also at an industry advocacy level, because there's some stuff that's going on in both those spaces, and the record labels and their relationships with some of these industry organizations who are supposed to be enforcing these laws that aren't doing it. So but that's not to, again, take away the responsibility. All artists, everybody, all this information is out there. You've got to look into it and kind of, you know, spend some time, you know, protecting your practice.
Well, okay, I want to just switch it up a bit, and I'm going to say a few words. Crypto, blockchains, Bitcoin, debt, finance, freedom, banking. Let's talk about the importance of teaching our Pacific Island people about financial literacy.
Beautiful. Thank you, sis. You know, if it's not for people like ourselves talking about it, or you asking me that type of question, to a lot of the audience right now, they're like, what the heck's that? Like, I know as a child or as a teen, you know, I had a Japanese car. It's a funny memory. Like, I had a Japanese car, and for so long, it had these Japanese radios that didn't go past 91 FM or something. And so, you know, like, I was either forced to listen to my FM and hear the same song over and over again, or listen to News Talk ZB. So, you know, I used to listen to News Talk ZB, and on the hour, every hour, they have a, you know, they have the news broadcast. And so they'd read the news, local news. Cool. Oh, yeah, I'm listening. International news, yep, listening. The weather, I'm listening. Sports, I'm listening. Then they'll talk about the stock market, and I'm like, well, I'll switch off. I'll do something else. I don't know what that means. And then I'll come back on for the traffic report. And so, you know, it's because I didn't have, you know, if you don't understand something, you're not going to engage with it. So, like, you know, I never had my parents are too busy working, you know, so many hours a day, and then taking all that money and giving it all to church because nobody taught them. And nobody taught us. And so, you know, ever since kind of having to lean into business and kind of, you know, migrate over to this whole space of the private sector, you start realizing that there's some core fundamentals that we are not being taught in our communities and so forth. And so, you know, none of us, you know, well, I can't say none of us, a lot of us were not taught to invest. And it's not timing the market, it's time in the market to invest early. So a lot of us missed the opportunity in the, you know, in the early, in the 80s and the 90s to invest in, you know, technology companies like Apple, Amazon. Like, just by putting a few thousand into Amazon back then, you'd be a multi-millionaire now, you know. And so a lot of us have missed that opportunity. However, we're getting a second opportunity through technologies like blockchain and, you know, like Bitcoin and so forth, because we are so early in this space. And when you look at the way that it's being adopted around the world, like, it's the fastest growing asset in history, fastest growing asset in history. It's doubled every year over the past 10 years. And so, you know, for communities like us who want to play catch up, it's about kind of leaning into it and kind of exploring what it's all about. You know, one of the criticisms a lot of people I hear, they're like, oh, you know, I don't really understand it. I don't want to get into it. And I'm like, man, we come from a nation of people who used to sail over the horizon. Like, we were the best navigators, while the rest of the world was like sailing safe to the shoreline so that everybody could watch them safely, America's Cup style. We were like Moana, you know, we're like, I don't know what's beyond the horizon, but I'm going to go look for it, you know? And here we are in, you know, decentralized 2021, and it's unknown, but this is the perfect time for us to be sailing and leaning into the unknown. You know, I look at our parents' generation, like, I'm like, okay, how hard is it to learn how to download an Exodus wallet and buy from Easy Crypto versus being in the plantation worker and just tapped on the shoulder, you're gonna go there. You barely got any money. You've got no money. You get there, you've got no job. You've got no resources. You've got no accommodation. You've got no family. Yet you're supposed to survive and then also build the family back home in Samoa. And that's exactly what our parents did. And so when you look at the mission that they were able to accomplish, and, you know, the way they leant into that unknown, and just through sheer hard work and faith and determination, they were able to set us up. It is now our duty, our responsibility to take this, you know, this accumulation of whatever resources we've got in our generation too, and is out now our time to put that capital to work and start investing it wisely, and just building the next foundation for those coming through. So that's what blockchain and crypto and decentralization means to me. Yes, there's the monetary side of it too. You know, it's the fastest growing asset in history. Like, if you bought Bitcoin a year ago, you're up, you know, more than double. Like, your bank is giving you 0.01%. Like, and yet as Pacific Islanders, we're just taught, just leave it in the bank, just save it. It's like, you're losing it to inflation. Inflation's at 6.2% around in some parts of the world. Here, and that's what they say. They say that inflation in New Zealand's 5%. It's more likely to be 10, 15, which means that everything around us as a community is going up 10, 15%, or what they say is 5%, but our bank's only growing by 0.1%, which means that just by not doing anything, our communities are getting poorer. We need to start investing and beating that rate of inflation by investing into things like Bitcoin and other assets like property and all these types of things. So that's why I'm really passionate about this space.
Do we have other people like yourself who are out there in the community, you know, sharing this knowledge with you know, with people who are perhaps interested? Are there others like yourself who are, you know, passing on this knowledge, or is it kind of like word of mouth at that kind of stuff right now?
It's growing. It's growing. You know, but there's so much. It's hard to get into the space when it's just people. A lot of people are just barely getting by anyway. Like, life is stressful enough as it is, just trying to manage in this COVID environment and job uncertainty and vaccine hesitancy. There's so many things that are demanding our attention that it's very hard for a lot of people to kind of, you know, lean into this new thing, another thing to be, you know, and that's the sentiment I get from a lot of people. But it is slowly growing. You know, I'm starting to see more and more people start to kind of inquire. Actually, I'm on the receiving end of it. I used to kind of like just be like, I feel like, to me, a lone voice, and I'm not the greatest on social media. I've been trying to just kind of regulate my time and space in that, but more and more people kind of reaching out now and going, hey, what is this thing you keep harping on about? So in that sense, I can kind of measure that there is a growing interest in it. And, you know, there are some OGs in the space that have been at it for a while. And so I'm trying to educate myself off them. But we're all in this together. Like, I only got into this in March last year, 2020. So I'm still relatively new to it. But I've been, you know, once I knew what the technology does, I was like, okay, I'm all in. Like, literally everything I'm doing, like even this, the space I'm in is being built at the moment to kind of be a production metaverse, to recreate the spaces that we're about to move into and so forth. So it's an exciting time to be in it. Also, like, if you understand how the technology fundamentally works, then you realize it is a very dangerous time too, because the status quo and the powers that be will not want to let go of their, you know, it's just history repeating. They're not going to want to let go of their bags and, you know, their power and so forth. Where, you know, at the moment we live in a paradigm where everything, all of us, go through centralized systems. So whether it's your bank, or whether it's the way politics, or whether it's the way your royalties flow, it goes through these central organizations or people. That is now being flipped, where all the power gets spread back out amongst the community and it's being decentralized. And so those power structures are not going to want to give it up without a fight. But there's, again, like I was saying before, there's good people in good spaces who are fighting really, really hard for us. And I want to be one of them too. So, you know, in a lot of my work, I've been shifting it into a space where I can kind of leverage all the production knowledge and infrastructure that I have and deploying it within these spaces.
Well, yeah, you know, I came to that one Zoom meeting. It was, man, I've been like researching, you know, I was blown away by just all the information. And I've just honestly, it's so, you know, you come to one meeting and then I just start noticing things and I'm like, my God, have I been blind to this? Like this whole time, like, oh, I've heard of that, but it didn't really register. So yeah, I'm still learning, still researching, you know.
Yeah.
That you are passing on this type of knowledge to, you know, to our people, because if not you, who else is gonna, you know, if not the few of you who are doing it, who else is going to share that with us, really?
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it too, it's the opposite model of the current model. Like, the current model is the media back in the 90s used to put out in their publications, oh, the internet is a fake thing. This is not a real technology. Like, I regularly share clippings of the headlines from the 90s, 2000s, where they're telling people, don't believe in this internet thing. Yet that's what they tell people publicly. Behind the scenes, they're out telling their brokers, can you buy us some more Apple, Amazon, all these types of things. And then, you know, once their bag is loaded, then they tell people, and then, you know, and so forth. Whereas for us, we have the opposite model. It's like, no, I'm not going to hide this information about Bitcoin and so forth. It's like, no, tell everybody, because we all benefit from it. By other people coming into the market drives the price up, and they get to grow their the generational wealth early. There's only like 3-4% of the world that's in this right now. This has never happened in history. In history, it's always the big money and the industry, the whales, the investors that get in first, and then retail. This is the first time in history everyday people got in before the governments and the big banks and the industries. They are late to the party. Right. And so they can't control this anymore. And so as a people, we don't want to be like the government's trying to hide, or the big banks that are trying to hide this information. Like, we are trying to tell everybody, because there's more power in numbers than all these centralized people at the top.
Absolutely. I want to take this opportunity to actually just shout out Noma, shout out your best friend and beautiful wife, the sis Noma. I mean, when we think about 37 Hertz, which is your company, she plays a huge role in this. Please share with us what she brings to the team, and just the importance, her important role in bringing everything together. Because you're not just the one-man gang.
Absolutely.
She's so important. So could you just share with our audience just a little bit about,
oh man, beautiful. Well, first off, thank you, sis, for acknowledging her. I've done so many interviews lately that just, you can just tell people are just kind of running by the numbers and just trying to get the interview done with. But I really appreciate that. You're absolutely correct. There is no me without her, and I mean that literally. For those who know her will know that she is she's a real people's person. She has a very genuine heart for people and family. And I'm very lucky that she's had a heart for me as both an artist and as a human. She is the backbone for everything that I do. She brings so much structure to my chaos. I like to say that she is the snare to my kick drum. As I've kind of said, my mind is always running 1,000,000 miles per hour, and I'm always like the tortured artist, and there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of chaos, but she reins it all in, and she kind of makes things digestible, and things don't blow up. And at a personal level, she has put up with so much of my shit. We've had a crazy journey of ups and downs, like the stock market, like our weight results, like life. Lots of ups and downs in the personal, but we've just persevered, and she's always persevered for me, and she's always persevered for the industry. This industry is very, very lucky to have her, and I say that objectively, not because I'm her husband and not that I'm in business with her, but I have seen, like, some of the conversations I've heard around industry stuff I've been hearing since a teenage kid in OMAC Hall, in the Aotearoa Music and Arts Centre Hall. Some of the problems they're talking about the industry then, they're still talking about it now, which tells me that there's a lot of people in their positions of power that haven't been doing what they should have been doing. And if people really saw behind the scenes the level of dedication, the same way that she is so driven to look after her elderly father, and the same dedication she has to grow tomatoes so that granddaughter Nala can kind of see how that works, is the same way that she approaches the industry, and like, how can I make this industry better? So she is a beautiful soul. She is an amazing person that this industry is very lucky to have. Our wider families are very lucky to have, and I'm very, very fortunate to have her around, not only as a business partner, but also as an amazing wife and an amazing cook as well. So.
She's always posting these just gems on she posts family and things on stories, on her IG stories, but she is forever posting these gems. And if I'm having a tough day, I love checking into her stories, because I'll read something and I'm like, thank you, sis, I needed that. It's been a struggle today. So I appreciate like that. And I was so excited when I finally got to meet her in person, because obviously I've met you before, but when I finally got to be in that space, I was like, this is the table that I see on the videos. And then I saw your studio area and I was like, this is the piano that Fayum was always playing on. I mean, it was just so exciting. It was such a buzz to be able to just to see you guys in that creative space, man. So that was pretty special. And yeah, man, I just think, like you said, people don't realize the amount of work she does behind the scenes. And, we got to give her flowers, man. She's
absolutely
awesome. So, I was going, I want to talk about orchestral hip hop. Did I say that right? Orchestral hip hop.
Say however you want.
So I probably said it wrong, but this work that you, you're always sharing like snippets of you working with the orchestra. It's so buzzy, and then the specific project I want to talk about is Remix the Orchestra, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I was like, man, this is so cool, bringing these two genres together. Let me stop. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, massive, sis. Art and creativity for me has always been a way to just make peace with stuff. Like, I'm going to tell you now, like, it conflicted me as a teen when I was in classical lessons because, going to those classical lessons and learning that stuff doesn't really sit well with the homies in the car park listening to gangster rap. It was like, what did you get up to today? I was learning some Haydn and some Beethoven sonatas. It was like, not the, wasn't the coolest thing. And that's social pressure and so forth. Right. However, now, being much more mature, I look back and I'm so grateful for those experiences because, it forced me as an artist because, you try to take these things that conflict you and you try to resolve them through art. And so it was always natural for me to like, how do I take that element of myself, the hip hop, and how do I take the element of classical and how do I just make them work? If in real life I'm conflicted, how can I change it? So in real life, I was like, fuse them. And so there was an opportunity, Norma used to work at the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra, so she was PA to the CEO for a long time. And they reached out way back to see, they knew of my background. They knew that I was classically taught, Royal Schools of Music. And then they also knew that I was active in the, New Zealand hip hop scene. And so they were like, hey, we're wanting to do this program, the education department, Lee Martelli. She was like, would you be keen on fronting this and just whatever you want to do, would be keen to support it. And so we came up with this program called Remix the Orchestra, APO Remix, basically where we was like a crash course where we took a whole lot of kids from the hood and put them in the studio with classical players. And it was beautiful to watch because you've got these kids who have no idea how classical works or how these instruments work, but their whole thing was all about just exploring things and just doing crazy things with sound and instruments. And then you got people from this very conservative classical world, because remember in the classical world, when you're a classical player, you can't play whatever you want to play. Right. You have to read that note, be very strict, and watch the conductor, and you play that note with that dynamic and this duration, and you lean into it when the conductor drops his hand, like you're following the rules. So orchestra, follow the rules. Hip hop, break the rules. So you bring them together and you have this fascinating combination of just kind of what pops out. And so that was a great period, working with them, with the orchestra. And we had a crazy concert in 2012 at Auckland Town Hall. And I remember one of those moments where I was on stage and I looked out into the audience and, you see like a middle upper class couple with their kids, European family sitting next to two kids from the hood I'm looking at the backpack next to them and I'm like, you guys snuck some Cody's cans in there, didn't you? But you've got them in the same place, listening to the same integration of music, and you can see like these urban kids going, wow, this music's pretty cool. This culture, both the music and the people from this culture, mostly Eurocentric culture, they were like getting into it. And then you got all the people, a lot of the European white audience who are like, man, I can see what energy this is all about. I used to think that they were all gangster troublemakers, but there's a beautiful energy to this music. And so that was the beautiful thing of it. It wasn't just the collaboration of the music, but it was the collaboration of the social class. It was a collaboration of, you know, the areas that they represented. And then obviously the music was always dope. Like I remember being on stage and they were playing nothing but a G thing. Like they were like, you know, when we were playing the show, they were like, are there any things you want to do in the show? And I was like, I want to have a battle between the orchestra and hip hop. and they were like, oh, how does that work? How does the battle work? I was like, oh, well, you know, you guys play your best 3 songs and we'll play our best 3 songs. And so the orchestra went away and they were like, okay, what are the classics that they want to drop? And then I went away to the hip hop community and I consulted with the New Zealand hip hop OGs. I got in touch with DLT, with Oli Mayava, Erman, you know, a whole bunch of people. And then they came back and then they were like, okay, we're going to put up scribes, not many. We're going to put up Biggie, Juicy, and Grandmaster Flash. You know, it was dope. And they put up Beethoven and, you know, it was crazy. And I remember being on stage and they were playing nothing but a G thing. And I was like, wow. Isn't it funny how life works? Like I used to be, you know, drunk in a RPOA car park listening to nothing but a G thing on a Saturday night. Earlier that Saturday morning, I was in classical piano lessons, and now here I am in the Auckland Town Hall, and they're both jamming out. You've got the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra playing nothing but a G thing, and I was like, here's a life lesson for everybody, you know, and you know, those things that happen in life where you feel conflicted and in pain are often the most beautiful things. You know, those are the moments you lean into, and instead of running from the conflict, you lean into the conflict, you lean into the pain, and you're like, there's something here. I'm being shown that there's something here to lean into that can be of use, you know, whether one day down the line, 1 month, or 1 decade down the line. And so that's what I realized, you know, as an adult on that town hall stage. I was like, here's the thing I used to be running from, and now we are playing Dr. Dre's track. And I'm the music director for it. You know, they're asking me, what songs do we play? And then I wasn't planning on it. So I just picked up the talk box in the moment and I started freestyling some talk box over the top of the orchestra, because I was like, I'm not going to get this chance again to talk box over nothing but a G thing with an orchestra playing it. So yeah, that's been a life lesson that I still carry to this day now. So it's like, you know, as we all live our lives and as we all live our crazy intersections of our lifestyles, our conservative nature, our very liberal nature, all these different things, when you find those spaces that kind of start to do this, those are not the opportunities to run from, but it's like, okay, is there something here that I can learn from or take away that and place that there until the time's right to harvest that batch. So it's been a cool ride.
Bro, that's so dope. I love listening. I love hearing this, because it's like you are an example of someone who just has been in these different spaces, and it's normal. It's normalized. Let's normalize going into these various spaces that normally you might go, ooh, I don't know if I can work with these people, you know, like too often I feel like, you know, at Pacifica Creatives, you know, we box ourselves in, but you are a perfect example of someone who's like, you know, man, I'm gonna take charge. I'm going to go to the table. You know, I'm a stakeholder in this project, and this is what I'm bringing. This is what they're bringing. Man, that's so exciting, bro. I love it, man.
Yeah, and that's like, I can honestly say for myself, like, this being my blessing for my career, is kind of, you know, not being afraid to be niche. You know, like there often is a pressure to kind of see around you a world dominated by what is deemed successful, and so you're like, oh, okay, let me emulate that style of music, or let me copy that thing, but you know, for me, I've kind of always leaned into just doing my own thing, not for any other reason, but it just feels cool. Like I know I geek out on certain things, you know, like there's certain things I used to do. Like once I discovered sampling, I was like, cool, you know, I'll sample, you know, American hip hop stuff, in Motown stuff. Then I was like, well, I'm sampling Motown, but that's their history. Let me start sampling local classics. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, if I can sample the sound, can I just sample the sound of trees and sound of waves? And And then, you know, even though that wasn't the coolest thing out, but it just felt right to me. Like, I'm not doing it for any other reason, but it makes me feel good. And yet, by doing a lot of those things, like so much of the major projects in travel I've been doing is being organizations or projects rewarding me for doing those niche things. They're like, yes, we can go to any other hip hop producer or artist or whatever to create this project, but we know that you specialize in this niche. We know that you are the intersection of these disciplines. And so by leaning into the things that make us different, and being, you know, not oblivious, but just being mindful, yes, there's other things out there, but this is the thing that makes me happy. That's something I've always kind of leaned into, and weirdly, it's just kind of just kept me doing this full time ever since a teen, you know. And it's been a real blessing to kind of have had the career that I've had just by being a tutu and being curious and just, you know, just trying things out.
You know, that leads us right into the next segment when you're talking about, you know, sampling and sounds. You know, soundscaping. I don't even know, is that what it's the term, soundscaping? You know, you start recording sounds, you make beats from them, you're sampling. You know, the Dawn Raids apology, the New Zealand government, you know, the soundscape intention. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you talk about, I've heard you in other interviews when you talk about frequencies, you're talking about, you know, shaping the sounds for this very special moment in history and so forth. So can you speak a little bit about sounds?
Yeah. Cool. So one of the fundamental shifts for me, so, you know, those who kind of follow what I do, they'll notice that I was really active right up until, you know, like the early 2010s, mid 2010s, doing music production. And then there was a shift to sound production, exploring that side of things. And really what it was for me is I used to view the world like the whole world was like you got this bigger world of the macro world of music, and music consisted of all these sounds. And then when I don't know, there was a flip where I started looking at the whole world. It was macro sound, and music was just a lane of it, a small part of it. It was just sounds organized into a certain type of production. And so I started looking at the world not through the lens of music, but through the lens of sound. And that's when I started kind of researching frequency and vibration and all these types of things. And so with that soundscape, like when you understand fundamentally how indigenous our people of the Moana use sound in a very healing way, in a very powerful way. It's not just an aesthetic thing where we just hear it and it's like, that's cool, but we use it in a way we can heal. Like, for example, like the porotiti in Māori culture, that's like the string whirl instrument. Like they place that over the chest of a sick child because there's mucus that's built up inside. And just by whirring that over the chest cavity, the bass frequencies dislodge the mucus and they become healthier. And so they're using frequency and music instruments in a way to heal, you know. And then without going off on a crazy scientific tangent, like frequencies have the ability to kill cancer and change our cellular structures and so forth. Even when we sleep, the different stages of sleep, beta, alpha, theta, delta, they are different frequencies. Our body is resonating at a certain frequency. So frequencies have a very powerful way to actually work, you know, manipulate the world around us and so forth. So that's how I started looking at it. So when this Dawn Raid apology came up, that's how I immediately started thinking. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to try to do A-7 or blah, 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 all these types of things. This isn't an aesthetic exercise. This is an opportunity to bring frequencies, because we got word that Jacinda was about to undertake the Sifonga process. Big deal, massive. I'm like, cool. So that's the level she's bringing to it. I cannot preempt what I believe her intentions are. I don't know her intentions. I don't know what her advisors in the Labour Party are saying, that, you know, let's do it for this reason or that reason. I'm not them. The only intention I can have is, as an artist that's being tasked with the responsibility of what frequencies are in the air. And so, you know, I always advocate for a lot of our creators out there to just document your journey on all the projects that you're working on. You're not just accumulating the resources for that project, but you're creating your own personal library, your own palette that for the rest of your career you can use as colors to color in future projects. And so when this project came up, I was like, okay, cool. I know the sounds that I need to get. Like, I want to bring our ancestors into the room. So let's bring Whale Lupo. Let's get Nawhanua up in the mix. This is taking place in Aotearoa. So Te Waio Taiki in East Auckland and Glen Innes when Parehuia returned. Let's bring those waters into the mix. And so I just went back into my archives and I was like, okay, which frequencies, which stories, which representations of locations need to be brought into the software so I can start layering them out. And then, one of the big things that I do on a lot of projects is I try to involve the community. I try to crowdsource sounds. And so, I put the quick hit out like 2 days beforehand to Instagram, and people just send in some sounds of your door knocking.
Right.
And so those, when people hear that historic soundscape, all those first door knocks are door knocks from around Aotearoa. And they've been woven into it. And so you got door knocks, you got Nawhanua's vibration in the waters of Whale Lupo, you got Te Waiotaiki and all these different things, and then you just start putting them together. There were some cop sirens in the end. I'm like, cop sirens, Erman gangster rap album, pull that in. And so you start using projects as coloring pencils. You're bringing the kaupapa of what that project represents, that siren, the kaupapa of that siren in that project, the water of that kaupapa of that project, and so you're bringing them all into the house so that at that moment when Jacinda undertakes it, that she's just not undertaking it on her own from her side of the whonga, but for us that are gullying the va that's being broken, we are like saying not only are our communities here through the door knocks, our ancestors are here because I once stood in those waters and I recorded the vibration. And, recordings are an intersection of time, space, and intention. And so they're all in the mix. And so that's how I fundamentally think about these soundscape projects, but all projects. Like I've done that for decades now. Like, people listening to jingles on New FM every 4 minutes, 5:31 PA. They're all tucked away in there. If you're in Glen Innes walking past Te Oro and it's playing from the outdoor soundscapes 24 hours a day, they're in there. Like all the works that I've been doing over the past decade, I've been sliding little secrets into them, and I might go to my grave knowing what's been in there, but they come from a place of service. Like I know that this is the way I view world. This is the way I view the information I've researched around how frequencies can heal, and so I'm tucking them into these works that are being broadcast out there into our community, so that they can play its role in terms of healing our communities through sound.
Man. I'm just like, man, to be a fly on the wall in your studio, man. Seriously. Malo Fear Journey. I had to touch on this. You completed your Malo Fear Journey. You were bestowed with the Tula Whale title, Whaiumu. How has that changed your life?
Yeah. Thank you, sis. I've struggled with identity a lot. That's why I call I'm anonymous. Like as you've kind of ascertained already, I've kind of all over the place. I've been conflicted in my identities. The identities I was on Saturday night car park, with the urban homies and being very liberal in our hot gossip days, and then going to church and then being that, I'd be a version of myself. When I go to church, I'm like, okay, this is my version. This is who I am. Then I go home and then this is who I am to my mom and dad until the door closes on my bedroom. And then I'm this version of myself. And then, I used to go to Auckland Grammar on the bus, and I'll have my starter jacket, my cap, my chain, my fila shoes. And then I'll walk with my Auckland Grammar, uniform underneath. And then once I get to the corner of school, I take it all off, and now I'm this version of Matt, and I operate like that. So I've lived my whole life, very conflicted, and it was a very painful journey, to be really honest. Like some people deal with it better than others. I didn't deal with it that well, to the point where I started becoming a cutter. So I used to cut and all these types of things just to get the release, to get the and then, I was suicidal at a point. So, just life was just damn tricky, not knowing who you are, not having real solid foundation. And I've always watched my father be real passionate about the culture, but it doesn't resonate with me because, I kind of, to be honest, I took it for granted. I was around the culture at home, I was around it at church, but, there's just so much going on. And you know, it wasn't it wasn't something that was that important to me.
Mm.
And ironically, this whole journey started from the arts. Like, obviously, as you've kind of gauged, like, art for me is being a creative, watching life through a creative lens is just being my default setting. And so I got challenged by, when I was making the jingles for 531 and UFM, I went along, cut a long story short, I went along to a friend's session to record the samples of the tapping to use for these jingles. The tufunga at the time, he challenged me. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm recording these samples for radio." Ironically, they were listening to that radio station at that, and I was trying to be like really egotistical. I was like, "See this radio station? That's going to be your tapping on it," thinking that I was doing him a favor. And he was like, "That means nothing to us. Like, to you, it's just to a sound. To us, it's a feeling. So if you really want to honor your work, and you know, then you need to understand how this feels." And that cut me to my core. You know, like, as artists, like, it's all about the feeling. And so at that moment, again, just like the moment where I press logic, there's these few moments that I remember very clearly, distinctly. When he said that to me, I was like, that makes sense. I'm going to leave this garage and I'm going to go home and prepare to get my tatau done, my Malo Fear journey. And so that's where it all started. Like, and then I went along to a course, the Angu Whaasamo 101 course back in 2014. And I was learning, I actually went along to document information and just knowledge to prepare for the Illuminati show. But when I started hearing at the beginning of the course, everybody has to go up to the front of the class and go, I'm doing it for this reason. I'm learning my culture for this reason. So, you know, I went up and I was like, I'm learning my culture because I want to do this Create New Zealand for the Illuminati thing. You know, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing it for the art.
Right.
You know, and then the next student gets up, I'm doing this for my grandma who passed away. And then, you know, the next person, I'm doing this because I feel plastic all my life. And then when I was sitting there listening to everybody's reasons, I was like, Matt, you're so shallow. Like, learn this properly. Don't just do this for the art. Like, learn the culture properly. Appreciate what you're hearing every week at church and at home. And so, you know, I did the rest of that 12-week program, and then I put out a video for them, and then that went viral, and then we got invited to Sydney, and was it Sydney? I can't remember where it was first. Sydney, Melbourne, Perth. Oh, sorry, it was Melbourne first, and then Brisbane, and then it became Hawaii, Seattle, and before you know it, 4 years had passed, 5 years had passed, and I was just traveling with them. But along that journey, like, we were always around the Suluapes as well. They had a little bit of partnership with them, and so, like, you know, one thing led to another. I was like, oh, cool. Well, this is, you know, all these intersections, the tatau being challenged by the tufunga. And then kind of getting it done. And then, you know, as they say, you know, you often hear them say, ka mo mola nguku, and then, you know, and so by me kind of getting God first, it then forced me to learn and appreciate the language and so forth. So that was a long answer to basically say it changed everything for me. Like, once I got it, I was like, okay, how do I serve more? What do I need to do? I started prioritizing. Everything shifted. Instead of just sitting around kind of doing a lot of, you know, urban music at the time, I was like, okay, what needs service with my skill sets? Yes, I can just keep doing this because it's the cool thing that I love to do, but where can I really deploy my talents and my production capabilities? And so I started doing a lot for the Angu program, building a lot of the infrastructure, started working with early childhood education, you know, frontline of defense alongside our families in Aonga Amata, and doing all these types of things, as well as our families. I'm lucky. Norma's a great example. She's always about that life. And so, you know, trying to rebuild broken relationships within my family, and all these types of things, and just trying to be a more nuanced artist where everything's underpinned by a cultural framework about how our culture, you know, views the world and so forth. And then, you know, getting, ironically, one of the, you know, life imitates art. You know, anonymous means having no name. And then my father was like, you know, and I was like, whoa, anonymous has been given a name,
right?
You know, and the name is my father's name, you know, and that's a metaphor in itself. And so, you know, as these things kind of unfold in my life, I was like, wow, man, God works in mysterious and not so mysterious ways. And so, you know, if people that know me from over a decade ago will know me as a very different Matt, you know, who was very aesthetically exclusively about urban westernized culture. And, you know, I even, man, like I struggle with it because I used to do a lot of rapping over my production, but I had this default American accent that I look back now and I kind of cringe. But you know, you emulate it. It's just that's just the thing around, you know. And you know, I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, you know, I was really shaped by those influences and so forth.
Right.
But you know, now looking back at it and looking at how rich the culture is, and like it's a strong point for me now. Like all the productions I work on, I leverage my history, you know, in terms of like the service I do for the Samoa, and just, you know, I prioritize projects where it can be underpinned by cultural frameworking through our Indigenous Moana outlook.
So, resample Te Tau, March 9, 2022, Aotearoa, New Zealand, International Festival of the Arts. Yes. I love how you're doing all these really cool things. I'm like, man, I need to up my game. Tell us about it, bro. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so, you know, again, it's just all part of this ongoing journey of being a tutu. So, you know, went from sampling trees and birds and water, and then, you know, starting to make beats out of it and all these types of things. And then, you know, those radio jingles, sampling Te Tau was a start. And then I started sampling Te Tau sounds for like other projects like Black Race. So Black Race have an amazing work called Crying Men that toured the US. And I got to work on that with one of my heroes, Submariner, who's an amazing producer who I can't give his flowers enough. Like, for those who don't know who Submariner is, he produced Ermin's debut album, Kaz the Field Style, King Kapisi, Damn Native. This dude's the OG, and I got to work alongside him on creating that soundtrack. But you know, a lot of the work that I did on that soundtrack for Crying Men, for Black Race that toured the US, sampled Te Tau sounds. And so that went off, and then they invited me back to the Gorilla Collection, where they commissioned artists to create a 30-minute work with their dancers, and I built that all around Te Tau samples, and that went off. Got a lot of good feedback from that. And so, you know, the opportunity came up where I was offered a government residency through Massey University. Shout out to Herbie Bartley, an amazing person over there at Coca, Massey University in Wellington, and they've got an amazing studio. And he was like, hey, would you be interested in doing a government residency in partnership with them? And Troy Kingy was the last one. And I was like, man, I'd be crazy. He goes, it's up to you, whatever you do. But then COVID hit, and so that morphed into a different residency. The one that I'm currently undertaking. And then, so that was, they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, man, I recorded all the samples from when I got my Te Tau, but I never did it, you know, they've just been kind of parked there. I did a little bit of experimentation through these other works, but as a whole, I haven't built anything out of it exclusively. So I was like, man, this seems like the right opportunity. And then I started being an artist rep on the New Zealand Arts Festival pre-COVID as well, just to kind of give feedback in terms of the infrastructure and how they commission stuff there. And that was really interesting. And then they came back to me and they were like, you know, we really enjoy your insights, but would you be keen on being an artist exhibiting at the next one post-COVID? And I was like, whoa, massive. Okay, yep. And they were like, what do you want to do? And so I was seeing that, you know, it started becoming these pieces. I was like, okay, Massey University Arts Residency, New Zealand International Arts Festival opportunity to debut a work. And so I was like, cool, let's bring these all together. And so that's basically how this work came about. So the idea at the moment is that, you know, I got my Te Tau done over 7 sessions. And so it's going to be a 7-movement or 7-track album or 7-movement symphony soundscape. 62 minutes over 7 sessions, and each session represents a different movement. So, you know, starts with the va'a. Movement 1 is the va'a, and what that represents in terms of navigation. And then 2, you know, and all the different sections, they all, you know, through my time with the Suluapes and the Koinga Aleva'a, you kind of get a lot of information and inside information. And, you know, things that don't go into the books, things that don't get into academia. You hear the nuances when you're in the garages with these guys all around the world. And so I was like, okay, let me tuck these as a framework underpinning into this piece. And so that's essentially what it is. I'm building a soundscape, like that's the first foundational layer, is taking all those samples, building a 62-minute soundscape. And then once that's done, then using the Massey University studio to kind of record string orchestras and indigenous traditional instruments and live instruments over the top. And then we have a string orchestra play live over the top of it. And then we have video projection that's just kind of referencing what's kind of happening in the music. And this will all be taking place at TSB Arena on the waterfront in Wellington on March the 9th next year. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's really exciting. It's a culmination of a lot of the spaces I've been in.
You know, the media, they like to portray, you know, there's this narrative of South Auckland. Someone who was born and bred in South Auckland, what do you want the world to know about your community?
South Auckland, you know, it's a village. You know, it really is a village. Like, you know, zooming out a bit, like whenever we do anything great, like it's not us that did it great, it's our parents that did it great. If we do something bad, you know, like it's what we do represents our village. But, you know, now that we're here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, you know, our hood becomes our village, you know, and it's not exclusively Samoan, you know, you're alongside many other cultures and so forth. And so you learn to get along. And often we don't have a lot of the resources, you know, but we know how to make everything stretch. We know how to make an opportunity stretch because we don't come from a place of abundance. We're trying to teach ourselves the abundance mindset, growth mindset at the moment. That's the ongoing journey. But in terms of a community, you know, we haven't had much, but we do brilliantly. I mean, look at all the superstars that have come out of South Auckland against all odds. We love the odds, you know. We don't view it as a barrier, but we view it as a challenge. You know, it's not fear that stands in front of us that stops us, but we use it behind us to push us forward as a tailwind. And so South Auckland, you know, the media loves, like, exactly as you say, they love to, you know, put us in a certain light. But, you know, we are unapologetically proud of what we've been able to achieve. There are many elements that we need to expand upon. You know, ourselves, like, let's not just put it all on the media. We don't make it easy on ourselves. Let's be straight about that. You know, but that's, every community has its challenges and so forth. But, you know, South Auckland, it's home for me. It's the village. You know, we might not be in Samoa any longer, but we are still next to that. That's exactly why we moved here, next to the Moana. That's Te Waiohua. And, you know, you can see Mangere Mountain in the back, Te Paeneo Mataho. Like, that's why we moved here, was because this is our local village. And it reminds me and Noma about our parents' migration here, and that we are still sailing. We are still trying to get to the next place. And as South Auckland, we are all still sailing. We're trying to migrate to the next place. Yes, we've done proud to get here. You know, we're proud to get here doing all the things that we've achieved, but we need another shift. We need a gear shift, South Auckland. We can't get by on, you know, we can't be that dude in the room who's just talking about his past wins and so forth. We need to kind of expand the types of things that we are known for outside of the traditional things that people point, you know, like, oh yeah, South Auckland, great sports stars and music. Yeah, like, we need to get our Elon Musks, our entrepreneurs, our authors, our poets, our, you know, blockchain developers. We need to start, you know, really pushing as a community. But very, very proud of South Auckland. South Auckland is home.
How do you look after yourself in terms of self-care? What do you like to do? I know you're always on the go, so many projects and things that you're working on, but when you pause and breathe a little, what do you like to do to just really have some downtime and, you know?
Beautiful, sis. Well, you just kind of nuanced it there. Even something as simple as breathing, like, you know, like, my wife's always trying to, you know, get me, like, every day she, come join me outside, let's do some breathing exercises. And that sounds so simple, but that's what, those are the things I've forgotten to do, you know. It's the downside to being an artist like me. Like, as amazing as it is in certain things, like, it can often be a bad default because you forget to do all those simple things, like the basics, like drink water. Right. Often, like, you know, and breathe and those types of things. So, like, I've been getting better at those types of things. Sleep has been terrible for me. I've never had the greatest sleeping habits. So I've been trying to regulate that. So yeah, it's just the basics in life, you know, sleep, you know, try to regulate the sleep, try to eat well and exercise, all those types of things. I know it's foundationally simple for a lot of other people, but something I've always struggled with. I'm pushing on through. Like the tagline for Resample to Tell was lean into the pain, and I'm like, bro, you can't just lean into the pain artistically, mate. Like, you know, you better do your breathing exercises and get some drink, you know, go for a walk up the mountain, practice what you preach. So yeah, self-care is such a critical thing. You know, all our young artists coming through, you know, I guess I used to be a Malo Valley like my dad. And a lot of our fathers who are very, you know, I'm the tough dude. I'm just going to power through. Nobody's more powerful than me. No one's does more hours than me in the factory. No one does more hours than me in the studio. And I used to gauge my self-value through that. But you realize that's almost the worst thing you could do, because you're not recuperating. You're not being the optimized version of yourself. So definitely trying to be being more mindful, about what I'm doing. And you know, when it's time to work, man, you know, it's work, grind. And then when it's time, pencils down, classes up, chill. Like, it's just chill. It's just relax, completely do what makes you feel good. Do what rewards you. So, you know, replenishes you, so that when you step back onto the battlefield, that you're ready for it. And that's something I learned from a great book that I read. I say I read it. It was an audio book, but the War of Art. That was a great book, audio book. The War of Art. I know there's a book called The Art of War, but it was the War of Art. And that whole book talked about like the battle that you face when you step into those creative spaces. Like, you know, there's some people who sit around waiting for inspiration to hit, and then they feel like creating. And then there's those who just create because that's what they do. Even if there's no inspiration there, you sit down and you do it until it pops up. And so that's the challenge, is when it's time to work, let's work. Like, let's go all in and work. And when it's pencils down and it's time to chill, something that my wife reminds me of, like, even when I sit down to chill, I'm not really chilling, because I will always guide the conversation back to work, or I'll guide it back to crypto, or guide it, and it just does her head in. She was like, can you stop talking about that? Like, switch off your work, switch those things off, and just like, can I talk to Matt? I don't want to talk to Anonymous. I just want to talk to you. Like, you know, let's talk about our families. Let's talk about real life stuff. I don't want to hear about the work. And so that's something I'm trying to get better at.
I love how you weaved in the book. I love how you weaved in the book into the answer. Well done. Well done. Future aspirations, future goals and dreams, early retirement plans.
Future, man, you know, I'm really grateful. Like, I'm living a crazy life with my wife at the moment, you know, like just being able to do what we love and serve in the spaces we love. And the dream is to just be able to, the dream goal is to just make things I feel like making as a living on our terms, not exclusively on a lot of other organizational terms, because in the creative industries, it's often like that. Like, I see that now. I see that at the moment where, you know, there's many artists who have to take a bag to do a vaccine event. Maybe they believe in it. That's cool. But, you know, there's some artists who maybe don't believe, but they have to do it because that's a paycheck. And that's cool too. Like, we have to provide for our families. And, you know, I've grown up seeing a lot of artists, you know, kind of get funding applications denied. And then some big post on Facebook, you guys don't appreciate my value in this industry. Don't you know who I am? And I understand that. I completely understand that. But we want to, as a community of creatives, get to a place where we just create, and it's systemized in a way where we are just we make whatever we want, and it's monetized, and it's set up in a way that we are just living our best lives, creating our best work, and not worrying about anything else. And so, you know, one thing I've learned along the way is many of us artists that are in the space, like, we have a fundamental discipline, and then we often become multidisciplinary. Like, you might start in one creative thing, and then you're going to get you know, you get really good at that, and then you're going to explore another creative discipline, and then you might move into visuals or painting, and then we become very multidisciplinary. All the artists I know that are high end specialize at stuff, but they get really good at other things. And so I advocate for a lot of our artists, when you start expanding your creative practice, make whatever your first discipline is, that's your creative discipline, make your second one business. Like, because in music, like, you know, for me, like, it started off with sounds, and, you know, like, this kick goes with that snare drum for that reason, and then therefore the bass line should be played this way for this reason. You just take that mindset and you shift it over to the business sector, and you're like, okay, well, if I want this money, then I can do this thing and use that organization there to bring in this thing. And you're sitting, instead of using kicks and snare drums and arranging them in a way, you're arranging opportunities and collaborators in a way to generate revenue and ongoing income streams and so forth. And so that's the ultimate goal. Is at the moment I'm really excited about the entrepreneurial business side that blockchain offers, the opportunity that space is. And so I'm kind of completely rebuilding my practice on that, and that's the dream. Is I want to be accountable to a community that commissions me. Like, that's basically what it is. It's just, I'm just going to keep making what I make, and people that follow what I make and they love it, they're like, man, you know, that was dope. There's this thing in society that needs addressing, you know, like whatever that thing is. And then I'll be like, cool. What do you know, what I feel like I should make a movie, a music video on this, and they'll be like, yeah, that's the one. Okay, cool. And then we arrange it in a way where they crowdsource, and, you know, they put up the venture capital for it, because they're backing the vision that wants to be made, and they get cut in on the royalties. And so I'll make this music video, whatever, and then it gets, all the smart contracts are written in it. Everybody that's invested from the community, from the audience base, that want to see that thing anyway, because they want to see the art and they want to see the change in the world. And then once that goes out in the world and it helps create change in the world, not only does it create change in the world, but because it's plugged into these revenue blockchain streams, the more it gets shared, the more they are rewarded for their investments. It's like a no-brainer. So I'm really excited at, like I said, having the community that resonates with the work I've done, and the accumulation of networks. Like, for me now, it's about plugging in all the different spaces. It's like, let's plug the gangster rap world, the cultural world, the education sector, the early childhood education sector, the public sector, the private sector. Let's just plug them all in. And because I've got over 20 years history in these spaces, I would love to create solutions where these spaces can kind of interwork for a better future. And I'm just creating creative things that the community want to see. And then when I create these things, I give the equity back to the community. So it's a win-win. We get to change the world for the better, but we also get to make some income off it so that we can look after our families. So I'm really excited for the future of this space.
Man, I have one more question before we wrap this up. How can our Indigenous traditions and cultural practices survive in this paradigm, in this new paradigm of, like, like social, like the physical distancing, the whole COVID situation, how
yeah very, 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 very important question. It's one I'm starting to bang my fist on the table about in a lot of the spaces that I'm in, because I don't think people truly understand or appreciate what's coming with things like the metaverse and things like decentralized. As much as there's great opportunities and all these types of things, borders evaporate in the space, like, land borders and a lot of the current institutions evaporate when there's an opportunity for the whole world to congregate in the metaverse and what's coming. And things like culture are going to have a very solid conversation about how we maintain a presence in it, because our kids will be wandering into the space. And when we have an alternate reality that's already here where our kids can wander into it, and in real life you might be mocked for the way you don't pronounce your words correctly, or for the way you look, or for your skin color in real life in the analog world. And when you walk into the metaverse and you can be whatever dinosaur NFT version of yourself, or make yourself to be a millionaire in the space, and you hate your culture in real life, so you're going to be another culture in your digital avatar life. It puts up some fundamental questions about how we survive, how culture survives in this space. So we have to deploy our living cultural capital at the moment. So our elders are now critical, because what you don't want to be the version of culture is what often comes out through mainstream media, because it's a digital media form. And again, I don't want to throw some people under the bus, but when you research into how some of the stuff edits, how a lot of our current content has been edited and who's editing it, and so forth, you realize that a lot of the nuances and a lot of the histories aren't a good representation of what actually is, of how our parents actually know this stuff and so forth. So I kind of feel like there needs to be some kind of decentralized deployment of all the knowledge that our parents and elders have about the fundamental things about our culture, and embed it in a way that can be trusted and preserved, in this digital realm. Because, we used to navigate physical seas, and however the waves blow, we knew how to make it go a certain way. Those things are now algorithms. And for myself, I've had to navigate myself through my career as a living, because I've always viewed a laptop to me is like Synod. It's like I find it fascinating how we were able to take a raw resource like like these fibers and create something that served many industries. Like Synod, it serves the boat building navigation industry, it serves architecture, binding houses together, it created our clothing, the textiles industry, the food industry. We used to eat we eat coconut. So you've got one raw resource, and then you're able to supply 5-6 different industries. That's what I've been doing, laptops and software this whole time. I'm like, okay, well, how can I use production software to serve the radio industry, the TV industry, the film industry, the theater industry? And so the same thing with culture. As a culture, we now need to go, okay, what are the different industries we need to get our fundamental core beliefs and ideas and embed them within these industries now, not in the future, when other algorithms have taken over and have become the dominant version of what you look for when you type it into the search results. But what are the cultural fundamental things that we hold true to our cultures, and we need to kind of deploy them now into these spaces early, so that by the time, well, it's already happening, but when our kids wander into these spaces, that they have a safe place to go to. Because what you don't want them is to wander into a metaverse that's being built by people who have no cultural integrity, or no foundational values, or no preserving of the va whenua loa'i between a brother and a sister, between all these types of things that are fundamental to our culture. So that, it's something that I'm passionate about in these spaces, that we have to get a lot of our cultural capital. It's a reset button. The whole world's going through a reset. We can see our financial systems being reset. We can see our political systems being reset. We can see our health systems being reset. And we need a cultural reset. We need to kind of go, what are the core things that make us us? Take that and, not rely on kind of what's already being done, but kind of take living capital that's around the world now and deploy them in a decentralized way into the metaverse, so that our kids, when they put those headsets on, when they start getting these glasses, and when they start getting onto the apps and phones, that when they enter it, that they have there's always a home for you to come to in this space.
Man, I have learned so much in this talanoa, bro. Like I'm going to hand it over to you just to drop just some words of encouragement and some words of wisdom just to end off the show. But before I do that, bro, it means a lot that you came into this space. You've shared a bit of your journey. I mean, you're an amazing role model. You're inspirational, and the things that you're doing, you and Noma and your company, the things that you're doing, passing on that knowledge in the communities. it's amazing, bro. And I just, I want to wish you both just all the best as you continue on your life journey, on your entrepreneurial journey. Yeah, you've dropped so many gems today, and I'm still like, I know after this I'm gonna go away and I'll be like, I'll be on my Brave.
Let's
thing,
go. Yeah.
So thank you, Feumu, man. I'm just blown away by what you've shared today. Much love to you both, and I'll just hand it over to you now, just to wrap us up with some, final words of wisdom, just for our listeners and our viewers.
Yeah, cool. Taylor, I really appreciate it. Like I love the nuances of all the questions you've given, and it makes me feel quite often a lot of these interviews and podcasts, you just feel like, man, I'm just filling in these guys' numbers, their quota for their network's output. But I appreciate the respect, and life has been an interesting journey for me as both an individual and as a creative. There's a struggle. People always hear the struggle in my work. There's a struggle. There's a fundamental struggle between being enough and not enough. What I mean by that is, I often feel like I'm not enough. Like, even with all the amazing things I do, I know I've done some crazy, amazing things. If people were to really be with me in my down moments, I'm like, man, I ain't jack. I'm not, imposter syndrome, what they often call it. And it's weird how that happens. And then, I kind of step back and I'm like, man, isn't this fascinating? On one hand, they kind of both ring true to me. What I mean by that is, like in church, like you're taught that you're not enough, that only God can complete you. Which is true. Like, we need a power beyond us to kind of make us, to keep our ego in check and to keep us humble. That it's not all about us. That we need God in our lives to make us feel complete. Yet on the other hand, there's also another way of thinking that's true. It's like, you are absolutely enough as you are. God made you in His image. Why do you need justification from anything else? That you have full, free, He's blessed you with free will to do whatever you want. And so we have this crazy, interaction between these two worlds of, as an individual, you are enough, and then you are not enough. To me, both are true at the same time. And that's what frequency and energy is for me, is because everything is vibration. And so it's like always going back and forth. If you look at any light ray, any sound wave, the frequency never goes in one way. It will always at some point come back in, and it'll go back. And that's life. Life is alternating between these currencies of being enough and not enough. And so instead of just kind of spending all your time kind of going, man, I'm not good enough or whatever, it's just like, just live in your truth and just know that I'm enough. I am cool to be me. I don't need anyone else's justification to be amanga ia or to be valued. I am enough. But at the same time, I am also not enough. I need God in my life. I need a higher power to be able to drive me. And so that's been something for me that I've had to get my head around. And when you study things like the stock market and frequencies, you realize everything's the same thing. It's just the yin to the yang. It's just frequency, vibration, just going back and forth. It never just goes here and sits here. Like, the market doesn't just go up. It will come down. The market doesn't just go down. It will come up. But overall, it always trends up because we believe in opportunity. We believe in growth and all these types of things and so forth. So that's been one of the greatest things in my life, has been an acceptance of that. Yes, the dark clouds come every now and then where, I momentarily have these thoughts that I'm not enough. And I'm sure that a lot of our members out there, but I really want to encourage you guys to know that you are absolutely here for a reason. Like, just live in your truth. Just do things because you want to do it. Like, I was making a beat on a plane. That beat that I was making on that trip to Brisbane, I gave it to a mate and the movement. And then he emailed it on Messenger to another mate, other rappers. And, and then they kind of created a track, and then we recorded it, and then somebody offered to shoot a music video, and then we put it on YouTube. 2 years later, the Rock's team, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, reaches out and goes, hey, can we use that on Hobbs and Shaw?
Yes.
And it's like, okay, how does this happen? Like, I never, like, you know, what I'm saying is, I didn't start out saying I'm going to make a track for and make it onto the Rock's move. It didn't start like that. It was just about making beats on a plane, because I didn't want to waste 3 hours in the air, and I had no one on the other side of me, and that's what I do. Like, that's just what I do as a creative. And there's been so many examples of that in my life, where some of the biggest things that have happened to me have been when I've absolutely been mind switched off. I'm just being me. And so to everybody out there, you know, that's coming up, lean into whatever your pains are and so forth. Don't run from them. You know, face them head on, because the gems are really within leaning into those things, and, you know, just creates you. It's such a rewarding journey. And yeah, and all those other things that I was talking about earlier, be mindful that when it's time to work, let's work. And when it's time to chill, let's chill. And like I said, it's back to that thing, you know, it's when it's time to be here, be present here, be present in the work. Don't be distracted. And then when it's time to go to the other end of the frequency and the other end of the stock market, bear market, you know, then it's time to chill, whatever, you know. And just learning that alternating between the currency and the vibration has been something that's been fundamentally core to my success, is kind of starting to understand that when it's down, you persevere, because they're all coming up. They're all coming up. And also appreciate it that when you're in your ups and you feel like you're the man, no, you're not. There will be a down. Like, that's coming as well. So just trying to learn that regulation, just trust in life, trust in the frequency, trust in the vibration, trust in the market. You know, even in the market, you know, sometimes the best investment you can make is to not put it in the market, but to put it in yourself. Because when you take $1,000 and you put it into the Bitcoin, yeah, you're going to be wealthy and all those types of things too in the future, if you believe that it's going to trend up. But you can't do anything about it. Once you deploy your capital into the market, it's at the mercy of the market. Take that same $1,000 and put it into yourself. You can control everything that happens to that $1,000. You can control how much you integrate with this course that you're going to put it in. You can buy yourself a pair of new shoes. You can control what you do with your running. You have complete control as an individual. And then you also have control within the market. So it's about learning that integration between yourself as an individual and yourself as an individual within the collective. It's knowing who you are as yourself, and then who you are within the context of your church. It's knowing who you are as yourself and who you are as yourself within the hip-hop clique that you're with. So as Anonymous, you know, I've been struggling with that my whole life, and now that I'm much older, and it's starting to make sense to me. You know, I've got years of accumulated experience in these spaces where I'm starting to go, oh, okay, so this is how it works. And that's honestly how it works, is both are equally true. You are absolutely enough, but at the same time, you are absolutely not enough. It's just one of these weird things about life.